When I was working as a wildlife guide in Southern Africa, in KwaZulu-Natal at a place called Tanda Reserve, I decided I'd collect a lot of colorful pictures, and I decided I would basically share these pictures with you. These are some of the plant species that I found in KwaZulu-Natal, mostly at Tanda Reserve, but also along the coastline and at other sites around KwaZulu-Natal. This first slide is of an acacia species, Acacia boleia or Vaquilla boleia. It has very interesting pods. You can see the pods are quite distinctive. They have these sort of indentations and they're quite flat. And what's interesting about them is they have a very sticky sort of resin that comes out of them, that exudes from them. Hence the name sticky thorn acacia. It's quite characteristic, and you can see the ball-like yellow flower as well. Inflorescence. Here's a close-up picture of the same plant. This is an interesting plant. This is an impala lily, Adenium obesum var multiflorum. There are several species of this plant, of this particular genus, and it's from the Apocynaceae, which is a plant family that has milky latex and usually produces a twin pod. As a fruiting body, and the plants are usually succulent. They're fairly low growing, although these can form little trees, and they have these really distinctive and pretty flowers, which can be sort of ranged from this color with the white in the center to a very dark pink color. From the Asteraceae, there's the blueweed or Mexican paintbrush, Ageratum houstonianum. This plant is found a lot in disturbed areas in southern Africa. It's one of the many South American species that have actually been introduced to the country. From the Asphodelaceae, formerly the Liliaceae, is the June aloe, Aloe thrascii. It's typical of June vegetation. You can see some of the June vegetation in the background, wild silver oaks and strelitzias growing in the background there. It's one of many aloe species, but it's a very characteristic species that you typically find along the coastline in KwaZulu-Natal. Here's an aloe species, Marlotii, which is found in the mountainous parts or hilly parts of KwaZulu-Natal. It's a very upright and quite tall plant, and it is absolutely destroyed by elephants. When elephants get reintroduced into areas where they haven't been for a while, you'll find the aloes suffer quite a bit. But you can see on the leaves, if you look carefully, you'll see that there are a lot of spines on the leaves. It's one of the characteristics, and then it has the persistent leaves that remain on the trunk of the tree. This is a monocotyledon, incidentally. From the Amaranthaceae, which has a lot of edible vegetable plants, we have Alternanthera pungens, which is the paper thorn. It's called this because it has these sort of papery bracts that are sharp and prick you like a thorn. From the Amaryllidaceae, the saw-eye lily or ground lily, Amacarus coranica, a very striking lily species, or amaryllis species rather, and definitely well worth looking out for in the grasslands of KwaZulu-Natal. From the Cominaceae or spiderflower family is Analema dregaeanum. You can see it as these twin petals. Some of the species of this family can actually be used for eye drops. You can actually squeeze a liquid from the plant, but not this particular genus. This is a weed from the Basilaceae, the Heartleaf Madeira vine, and Redera cordifolia. I found this actually growing on the coastline over a lot of bushes and sort of coastal thicket. So an introduced species, which is quite a problem. The Leopard Orchid Ansellia africana is from the Orchidaceae, as the name of course suggests. The orchid family is a very large family. it's right up there with the Asteraceae or daisy family as one of the most diverse flowering plant families in the world. This particular orchid is an epiphytic orchid. In other words, it grows on trees as opposed to terrestrial orchids which you would find on the ground. It has very characteristic yellow flowers, and the flowers have little brown spots which are not really visible here. Here we have Antidesma venosum, or the tasselberry from the Phylanthaceae. It's a poisonous plant, but it is found fairly commonly. The baby sunrose, Aptenia cordifolia or Mesembryanthemum cordifolia, is from the Isoaceae. Used to be part of the Mesembryanthemaceae. Mesems are succulent plants, very characteristic of southern Africa, particularly the Cape Fynbos area, and they have these very, very striking purple flowers. From the Asteraceae also is the sea pumpkin or June cabbage. This is a very common plant on the coastline of southern Africa. It's very good for holding the sand and dune soils. Octotheca populifolia. Populifolia refers to the leaves that look like the leaves of a poplar tree. Here's another picture of the same species, and another one. Notice how the plant is emerging from the soil. So you can see all those cracking areas in the sand on the dune. That's actually where young seedlings are developing and emerging from the soil. From the Papaveraceae or poppy family is the Mexican yellow poppy, or yellow or prickly poppy, Argemone mexicana. This is found in very disturbed areas, once again an introduced species to southern Africa. And here's a cousin, the Mexican white poppy, Argemone ochroleuca, also found in similar environments, disturbed areas, heavily disturbed areas, where there's been a lot of traffic, foot traffic or trampling by animals, and where the vegetation has been removed either through drought or through human activity. From the Fabaceae we have the silver pea, Argyolobium stipulaceum. I believe, I'm not absolutely 100% on this, but that's what I think this is. It's a very, very pretty bush. This one was found on a hilly area, and it's got the characteristic trifoliate leaves, and it has this sort of silvery color with very hairy or mulliform leaves, and the typical flower of herbaceous plant. Here's a little russet pea, Argyolobium tuberosum, also trifoliate, same genus. Yeah, you can see the yellow flower with the big standard petal, and the kewl petals beneath it. Very characteristic of plants of the Fabaceae. This is a heliotrope, Heliotropium amplexicuale, a blue heliotrope, sometimes called a climbing heliotrope. It's from the Boraginaceae. The creeping foxglove or coromandel, Acistasia gangetica, is from the Acanthaceae. This is an introduced species in southern Africa. It grows a lot along coastal vegetation areas or bushy areas. It tends to be sort of at the foot of dense bush areas, and it has these very pretty flowers which are basically the size of my thumb. Very, very attractive flowers, but once again introduced. From the Asteraceae again, this is Aspillia notalensis and Aspillia daisy. You can see the ray florets of the capitulum or head of the flower, and you can see on the edge, okay, those are the ones with the petals, and then the circular or disc florets in the center, which are characteristic of a daisy inflorescence. Here we have a needle bush, Azema tetracantha. Very characteristic, 4 needles, all coming from the same point in a whorl, from the base of the leaf. this is characteristic of this particular bush. They obviously called a needle bush because of the needles, and they have a very painful, when you prick yourself, it's quite painful. From this family Salvadoraceae, which is the mustard family. Acanthaceae is a very characteristic plant family which tends to have a lot of very spiny bracts around the base of the flowers. This is a bush violet, Barleria elegans. There are a lot of different species of Barleria in many parts of Africa and also the Middle East. This is Barleria guenzii. It has a slightly more bluish flower. And Barleria monticola, another species. And finally, Barleria obtusa, a fourth species that I found in the bushes. This is a wonderful bush which typically grows sort of in sunny exposed areas, often along river banks or near to rivers. It's called the pride of the carp, Bauhinia galpinii, from the Fabaceae. Bauhinias have these characteristic leaves which are basically a simple leaf that is almost divided. It has two lobes and it looks like a camel's foot. From the daisy family, we have Bouquetia montana. Bouquetias tend to be low growing. They have these very long sort of leaves with spines on them, and you can see them here, and then yellow flowers that emerge, mostly yellow flowers, and they tend to occur in the grasslands. This is Bidens pilosa, the blackjack, very characteristic weed that is found all over southern Africa and tends to occur in disturbed areas. It's a pioneer plant, and the name blackjack comes from these fruiting bodies which carry the seeds, and they attach themselves by means of the bristles to people's clothing or to animal fur. Also from the Acanthaceae is Blepharis medeiros. This is quite a widespread plant and occurs also in India. I think it may have actually been introduced to southern Africa from India. Then from the Nyctaginaceae is the spreading hogweed, Boravia diffusa. This is a very characteristic plant. It typically has the flowers all emerging from a single point like this, and it's kind of like an umbel almost, maybe a cyme. It's from the Nyctaginaceae, which is the Bougainvillea family. This is a very common terrestrial orchid called the greenwood orchid, Bonatia speciosa, obviously from the Orchidaceae, and you can see the very characteristic hooded flowers of this species. Buffonida sticker is commonly called gifbol in Afrikaans, which means poison bulb, and it has these very characteristic flower heads which are very similar to Amacaris coranica, which we saw earlier. Also from the Amaryllidaceae, the flower bulb was used by the Bushmen to poison the arrowheads. So it's a highly toxic flower bulb, hence the name. There have been stories that botanists who've been drawing these plants have actually started getting headaches and feeling ill from working with these plants. From the Fabaceae again is the beach pea, Cannavalia rosea. This is a very characteristic trifoliate leaved plant that grows along the dunes and particularly along the beaches. So you can it's definitely one of the more characteristic plants you can find along the coastline. This is one of my favorite groups of plants, the wild caper bush, Capparis cipiaria, from the Capparaceae. Very, very interesting plant. It grows as a creeper up other trees and also up dead trees that have remained standing, in other words snags. And yeah, you can see the characteristic fruit, which attracts birds. They typically are members of this family either have a yellow or a reddish fruit, and that definitely attracts a lot of birds. This is a wonderful edible plant in that the fruit can be eaten. It's the Natal plum or large num-num bush, Coryza macrocarpa. It has a characteristic bifoliate thorn. In other words, the thorn forms two spines, and it has opposite leaves, an opposite leaf arrangement. There are several species of this plant, and they produce these red fruits. This particular specimen produces, or species produces, very large red fruits, and they are edible. They have a slight milky latex, but it's one of the few plants that has a milky latex, which is nonetheless edible. Normally, Apocynaceae is a highly toxic plant family. Here's another species. I believe this one is Coryza bispinosa, but I stand to be corrected. And then the sandforest num-num bush, Coryza tetramera. So there are a number of species with flowers that are all white, and there are various sizes, the flowers, and fruits as well come in various sizes depending on the species. From the Isoaceae, which is the Mesembryanthemum family, is Carpobrotus dimidiatus, which is the Natal sour fig or Natal feigie. Feigies is an Afrikaans name which means fig or little fig. Sour fig also is the English version, and it basically refers to the fact that when these plants fruit, they produce this fig-like, it's almost like a jam that is edible, and it's very, very tasty. This is Chamaecristum mimosoides or Cassia mimosoides, the feather-leaved cassia. Very characteristic tall plant that grows in grasslands. It has the long flattened pods, typical of the Fabaceae, and it has these cream-colored flowers, very, very long, elegant, thin compound leaves. From the Lauraceae is this obligate parasite, Cassitha filiformis, or love vine. It tends to grow in a scraggly mass all over vegetation, and it has haustoria, or roots that penetrate into the stems of plants that it parasitizes and lives off the nutrients from the plants. Cassitha filiformis. This is a Christmas berry, Chironia baxifera, from the Gentianaceae. I really like these flowers. They're very, very pretty, and of course they've got these bright red fruits. From the Pedaliaceae or sesame family is the wild foxglove Ceratotheca triloba. It's very, very pretty purple flowers, and it's found in disturbed areas in grasslands. You'll typically find them along bush runways, bushveld runways, particularly in reserves or any roadside really, along a dirt road. Chrysanthemoides monolifera, which has now been changed to Osteospermum monoliferum, the bush tickberry, a very characteristic daisy bush that grows quite upright, can grow to about 6 foot roughly in height, and it forms this rounded bush and produces these black berries which are edible, hence the name bush tickberry. The common thistle, Cirsium vulgare, with the very spiny leaves, typical, and the purple inflorescence that looks like a pincushion. From the Vitaceae or grape family, a very interesting plant, Cissus quadrangularis. There's another species, Filiformis, and I'm not sure whether it's one or the other, but they are very interesting members of the grape family. They have these succulent stems, which is reminiscent of a cactus, and then these grape-like leaves and grape-like tendrils, which give it away as being from the grape family. The plant is used to help strengthen bones and heal bones after a break. From the buttercup family, Ranunculaceae, we have Traveler's Joy, Clematis brachiata. Some members of the species are used to make friction fires. The wood is anyway. When it becomes woody, they're often vines, though, and they'll grow up various trees. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. I will be adding a few more videos on wildflowers of KwaZulu-Natal, probably all told around 300 different species.